This month of October, you and I will be combining Black history with Black literature, and we are starting with a very revolutionary woman who was part of a controversial yet necessary political movement that began in America known as the Black Panther Party. This woman gave birth to one of the most influential rappers in hip-hop history, known for his thug life persona, yet equally revered for his poetry, storytelling and outspokenness. Have you guessed it yet? I am speaking about Afeni Shakur. Not many people know that she was an important member of the Black Panther Party, and no doubt her son, Tupac Shakur, had the same type of fire and revolutionary energy that he channeled into his music. The book we will be exploring today is Afeni, Evolution of a Revolutionary, written by Jasmine Guy. It's October, and that means it's Happy Black History Month. But guess what? Black history is everywhere, every day. Black History Month is not just for Black people either, it's for everyone in a society that seldom includes Black history in its mainstream curriculum. How have you been engaging with the month? Besides listening to this podcast, which I am happy you are here with me, are you reading anything at the moment? Let me know in the comment section of wherever you are listening from. But for me, I decided to start this very podcast, Lit with Ren, during Black History Month. I am Ren and I like to study literature. People who know me tend to think reading is my hobby, but in actuality, reading for me is a means to an end. I always say my special interest is the human experience. The way I satisfy my curiosity regarding the many ways humans experience life is by reading about it. I read to analyze, to explore, to learn, to understand the myriad of ways we have and continue to exist on this earth and beyond it. Lit with Ren is a podcast that will explore history, spirituality, psychology, politics, philosophy, sociology, as well as romance, poetry, drama, sci-fi, fantasy, memoirs. The list goes on. If the topic is interesting and it relates to the world at present, we shall discuss it. Although I will use work from people of many different backgrounds, I will pay greater attention to works written by those from marginalized communities and or underrepresented voices, because in a world of publishing and mainstream bookshops, there are communities whose voices deserve to be uplifted, not excluded, erased or ignored. And I want to spotlight work and authors, past and present, who don't receive the same level of attention as others. So what inspired me to read the book? What inspired me was my curiosity about Afeni Shakur's life after watching a documentary called Dear Mama, which is a docuseries about both of their lives and how they entwined or interlinked. And I was already quite aware of Tupac Shakur's story, but I wanted to know more about Afeni Shakur. I wanted to know what her story is on a deeper level. And that's what made me research whether there were any books about her. And that's when I came across Afeni, Evolution of a Revolutionary. And when I saw that it was written by Jasmine Guy, I was actually surprised. I was like, Jasmine Guy, as in the actress from the comedy sitcom A Different World, or the actress who was in Harlem Night, or the actress who played the grandma in Vampire Diaries, that Jasmine Guy. She is a very multi-talented woman, clearly, and to add author to it, especially given how sociopolitically driven such a book would be, is very impressive. but random too. And as I kept reading the book, I realized Jasmine Guy, being the author, isn't so left field after all, because she had a close relationship with both Tupac and Afeni. The way that the book is laid out is like an interview with a friend. Jasmine Guy interviews Afeni and Afeni responds in her own words. So even though it was written by Jasmine Guy, Afeni's life story is still told in her own words. And I think that adds a layer of validity, trust and reliability. But also by having Jasmine Guy, her friend, as the interviewer, she asks the questions that I think a lot of us would want to ask. And I think having a trusted person doing it helps Afeni to answer honestly. So I liked the way that the book is structured. But what's in the book? Well, we get to see the events that laid the path for Afeni to become a respected member of the Black Panther Party, as well as her experiences within it and beyond it. And there's so many things in her story that I was surprised by and inspired by, especially coming from the perspective of a woman in the Black Panther Party, since we often hear from the perspective of black men. Anyway, let's really dig deep into the contents of the book. Afeni Shakur was born in North Carolina in 1947. Let me repeat that. Afeni was born in the South during the 1940s. Now, can you already see the threads of destiny in Afeni's life from day dot? This was a time of Jim Crow laws, segregation, KKK rallies, and burning crosses. There were a limited number of work opportunities, so most people were poor, and education for black and brown kids were underfunded and ill-equipped compared to that of the white kids. And she talks about this in her book. She speaks of this being a time when you were warned, as a black child, not to do certain things around white people. Otherwise, you could end up sexually abused in the cotton fields. You could end up killed. You could end up like Emmett Till, who, if you don't know, was a 14-year-old black child who was abducted, tortured, murdered by racist savages due to the lies of a white woman who accused Emmett of whistling at her. And Afeni was a child witnessing, absorbing all of the injustice, anger, fear and grief that surrounded her. So, can you imagine being a 5-year-old? Like, go back to when you was 5 and think about how you were as a 5-year-old. Now imagine you are riding in the back of your parents' car and you're driving past lynched bodies hanging from trees, or seeing the embers of a burning cross and knowing what that might mean, or being raised to be wary of certain people because looking at them the wrong way could make you end up like the strange fruit on the tree. And you know that it's all to do with the colour of your skin, something you cannot control. How would you feel as a 5-year-old seeing all that? And you know how people always say, the way a kid turns out is to do with the parents. I also say that society, the community, also has a lot to do with the trajectory of a child's life. Good, bad, or indifferent, or in between. Afeni's childhood, what she witnessed, and how she understood life in her childhood community reflects what happens during adulthood. It mirrors it. And it's not just about, Afeni saw racism, so she became a Black Panther member. It's about Afeni as a little girl witnessing how the people in her community felt about what was happening around them. But it was also about seeing how they responded to this. At 9 years old, something pivotal happened that would change the course of Afeni's life where her destiny was beginning to reveal itself. This pivotal moment is known as the Battle of Hayes Pond, and I'm about to tell you about it. It's January 1958, and the KKK have been organising inflammatory rallies through local neighbourhoods. They were assembling in unified hate. Instead of pitchforks and torches, they had flags and white hoods, advocating for 10 p.m. curfews on all African Americans and the Native American Lumbee tribe. Needless to say, tensions were growing thick between all communities. One wanted laws that favoured white supremacy. The others, though fearing for their safety, wanted to resist it. The KKK had organised a date to have a rally in an open field not too far from Afeni Shakur's home. So, in anticipation for the upcoming event, local KKK members and supporters were wreaking havoc on black and brown communities, burning crosses, tormenting the community, you name it. They wanted to instill psychological warfare on their neighbours who just so happened to be a little bit more browner in complexion than they were. Even the mayor himself sent a desperate letter to law enforcement begging them for extra help and support to cool things down because he feared that the rally would incite violence, and he openly expressed his opposition of the KKK. But his plea fell on deaf ears and the rally was to go ahead as planned. So, the community decided to take a stand for themselves. The Lumbee tribe was going to fight back, and even though African Americans wanted to fight beside their Native American neighbours, the Lumbee ethnic group insisted they stay out of this fight. They had this one. Afeni describes the event like this. The clan said they wanted to set the Indians straight, show them who's boss. Well, the Lumbees got guns and rifles and ambushed the clan at their own rally. Folks say it was a mob scene, shooting everywhere in the complete darkness of night. Black folk wanted to fight with them, but the Lumbees said they had it under control. They felt specifically challenged by the clan, you know. They were like, this is our battle. So we all just waited to hear what went down in Maxton and rejoiced with the news that they ran the clan out. Those white hooded crackers ran into the woods like the little wingrangs they were. About 1,000 Native Americans from the Lumbee tribe defended themselves against the KKK, and fortunately, no one was killed. So, as a 9-year-old black child, in Jim Crow, KKK, North Carolina, people ended up missing or lynched, and you've grown up living amongst all of that. Then suddenly, you witnessed something like the Battle of Hayes Pond. You saw people fight back, and that was the first time you realized, wait, I can fight this? You mean I don't have to accept it? I can fight this. This is how community can influence the trajectory of a child's life. Just by people fighting back, a young girl, Afeni, was inspired, and this young girl grew up to be a formidable woman who became a leader of one of the world's most famous revolutionary organizations. This, as she says, was the first time she really saw people like her resist. To resist the racial abuse and to resist the psychological torment of white supremacy. But Battle of Hayes wasn't the only thing that contributed to her fighting against white supremacy. She grew up in a community where everyone was poor and struggling. Afeni's father was a truck driver who was a raging alcoholic, and as a result, her mother endured emotional, physical, and financial abuse, and Afeni and her sister Glo grew up in a toxic household. But it wasn't until Afeni was 11 years old when she saw her mother finally defend herself. She says, "I thought she was weak because what I saw was her taking his shit. She wasn't a fighter, at least not a physical fighter. But one time in front of me and Glow, my dad tried to hit her. And because we were there, my mother did not let that happen. We never saw that blow connect because she threw hot grease on him, right from the skillet she was holding. She never would have done that if she were alone with him, but we were standing right there, me and Glow, and she was protecting us. She didn't want the girls to see that hit, even though we knew it always went down like that." Afeni's mother throwing hot grease on her abusive partner reinforced the importance of fighting back against oppression. From fighting against white supremacy to protecting yourself against misogyny and sexism, the threads of destiny looped into what we now call intersectionality. Afeni, being black and a woman, is something many of us have had to navigate in societies that are not kind to either, let alone people who are both and more, all at the same time. Witnessing her mother's suffering and domestic oppression in a violent household contributed to Afeni and her sister's activism. And it's no wonder how she became a woman who refused to be subjugated or dominated by any man, whether it was her father, husband, police officer, or even the FBI. It became a catalyst for Afeni's commitment to fighting for social justice and liberation. After learning the importance of fighting back in North Carolina, Afeni's mother and the girls moved to New York in the 1960s. Even though segregation laws were no longer legal, racial disparities were as prevalent as ever. In the book, Afeni tells a tragic story about her only best friend, Sharon, and the baby she gave birth to. Despite the baby being born alive, the baby was intentionally left to die by medical staff in the hospital, simply because the baby and mother were black. Sharon passed away shortly after. What Afeni shared is an example of why changing the law is not enough to change social attitudes. It just makes the attitudes more insidious. Medical negligence is far more likely to occur when the patient is from a marginalized community, especially if they are black women. It's the painfully harsh reality of racial disparities and systemic injustice within healthcare, housing, education, and employment opportunities, especially in 1960s New York. And it's still true today in America and even in the UK. And with disparities, in addition to police brutality and harassment in 1960s America, it placed immense emotional and spiritual strain on black people. And I know you can imagine how that must feel. You try and live your life, follow your dreams, achieve your goals, love yourself and your family, maybe do basic stuff like walk down the street, maybe to visit a friend, maybe because you just want to stretch your legs. Things that are very normal things humans do. Yet you're prevented from living this very human basic life because you are literally being attacked from every corner in society, with no one who is supposed to protect you protecting you. Instead, you're over-policed, under-protected, and dehumanized. And you have to live that reality every day. And there's people who are still living that reality every day today. So what else can you do? 1960s America. What else is there to do? especially when you are a young adult who is carrying so much trauma from childhood because of the violence and the hostile energy you were born into with no long-lasting means of escape. The pent-up frustration born out of a desire to just survive, to live, made a lot of young Black people find outlets in destructive ways, with some, including Afeni, turning to crime. Afeni spoke about being a gangster before joining the Black Panther Party. In fact, a lot of members had a history of being in the streets, but at its core, it was because of the rage they had that needed an outlet. She said, "We would visualize, actually dream about being hitmen, contract killers. We wanted to be professional killers." I think that was a common fantasy at the time. Black people were taking a lot of abuse. Afeni's past involved a life of crime and violence, a path she shared with many, including the man who'd become her husband, Tupac Shakur. More about them later. But despite the rage felt amongst the community, this was also a period of self-discovery through the reconnection of African identity and culture. Afeni, under the guidance of a mentor, embraced Yoruba traditions. She discovered her connection with Oya, the Yoruba Orisha, who is associated with strong winds and storms. And this is the time she adopted the name Afeni. This is the third significant lesson she learned about resistance. The first was resistance from white supremacy. The second was resistance against misogyny and sexism. And the third was about resisting internalized racist and sexist oppression. I think this indicates how important the journey towards self-acceptance and Black pride and heritage is in order to fight against white supremacy. And this reconnection of her African roots happened around the same time when Bobby Seale, the co-founder of the Black Panther Party, inaugurated the opening of Black Panther Party offices in New York. This was the dawn of a new era. She talks about how she felt seeing the image of the Black Panthers and understanding what they stood for. I see that picture of a Black man armed and looking the white man in the eye and saying, "No, not laying down and getting stomped on over and over again." When I see that, that is a powerful image to me. "They took my rage and channeled it against them," she points outside, "instead of us," she holds her heart. "They educated my mind and gave me direction." The need for change was clear, and it required something as radical and revolutionary as the Black Panther Party to do it. All the anger that these young people had about everything that was occurring to them at that time, as well as what they witnessed as children, and the generational trauma of slavery, Jim Crow laws, segregation, and so on, needed to be released in a way that could make their communities better. And the Black Panther Party was the organization to do that. She joined because she believed in the goals of the party. She started breakfast programs for children. She channeled her anger and her ruthlessness to benefit the party and its principles. She used the trauma of her experiences as a young girl with her mum and sister to help other families who'd need the help that would have benefited her and her mother when they were young. It was a loyalty that made protecting and caring for her community a duty she was passionate about and committed to. But it was around the time she joined the Black Panther Party that she met Lumumba Shakur, who would become her first husband and the source of her new surname. See, Lumumba's life story is another fascinating one that mirrored Afeni's in many ways. He had a history of involvement with street gangs as a youth, called the Bishops, and had spent significant time in both juvenile and adult prisons. And it was during his prison experiences, even organizing prison riots, Lumumba's political awakening took root as he witnessed the racial injustices within the justice system and correctional facilities. And that's how he came to join the New York Panther Party before establishing his own chapter in the Bronx. His family's association with the Nation of Islam, along with his leadership and respect in both the party and on the streets, elevated his status and influence and made him a great leader. And this was exactly what attracted Afeni to him. When I saw Lumumba that first time, it was a rally for the Panthers in the park. There he was, looking like something pretty, with gold bars on his black naval 3/4 length coat. They were red, black and green. Lumumba was clearly running shit at that rally. He was busy and people were coming up whispering in his ear. The whole visual thing. This black man as a soldier, a military person and a leader. He could take care of me. They were married a few months later. Their relationship made her discover new things about men, including seeing positive portrayals of fathers and husbands in Lumumba's family. She also said Lumumba and his friend Sekou were the only men she knew who didn't abuse women, that they truly loved women. And when I read this, it made me think about what some people on the social media universe say about the supposed, quote, golden years, unquote, of marriage and relationships. Remember, Afeni wasn't a recluse who didn't know anyone. She was pretty known in the streets and in the community, yet she said she only knew 2 men who didn't abuse women. 2 men. Not 5, not 10, just 2. The golden years of black marriage and the black family, quote unquote, was a time when domestic violence or sexual assault in the home weren't even recognized as illegal. And if I take it back to my earlier point about channeling rage by committing crime, then that rage could also be directed towards your family and children, even if you've never committed a street crime. So when rage, disillusionment, frustration about the lack of opportunities to have even a basic quality of life and survival, or to even fulfill the fantasy of the male provider and breadwinner, that energy of frustration and insecurity becomes a tool that either destroys its own community, destroys other communities, or destroys the person internally and their loved ones, because the energy has not been transmuted into something that can actually help the community by focusing on the roots, which is capitalism and ideologies that are its foundations that hold it up, like white supremacy, patriarchy. The Black Panther Party, in general, kind of knew this, or at least set pace the importance of really dismantling these ideologies. To help the community and everyone in it takes a certain amount of reasoning, reflecting, self-education through reading, execution and conviction, and most importantly, love for self and love for humanity. And Afeni and other Panthers reconnecting to their history and reclaiming their African identities reminded them the importance of loving themselves, loving their history, and the potential future, which then turned into love for the community that didn't just help Black people, by the way, but anyone who needed it. This was the intention. This journey of self-rediscovery and being in service to your community didn't just stop there. It also impacted how some navigated family and marriage. Once you begin to consciously undo the threads of white supremacist conditioning, you open yourself up to other ways of existing as a human. Why? Because naturally you'll begin to question everything, especially if you are also doing the work at rediscovering who you are as a person. You begin to understand that even in the institution of marriage and the concept of nuclear versus extended family, they are not untouched by colonial, white supremacist, Eurocentric and capitalist narratives, and this illustrates Lumumba and Afeni Shakur's unconventional marriage and relationship. They didn't follow the status quo in their marriage at all, even from the moment they exchanged vows. It was Lumumba, Afeni and his friend, as witnessed, in the room when Lumumba said his vows. He repeated, "You are my wife, you are my wife, you are my wife," 3 times, and that was enough to be married for them. This is what Lumumba told Afeni, and she accepted it. He told her this was accepted in the Quran. Secondly, Afeni was actually Lumumba's second wife, as in she was wife number 2. And he also had children with his first wife. Afeni is adamant, though, in stressing that their marriage was truly a partnership. Lumumba loved and respected her views, her perspectives, the way she thinks, the way she articulated herself, even if they disagreed. Among the many things they discussed were having an open marriage, or what we now know as polyamory. Afeni moved into the house and they all lived together, including his first wife and children. But despite Afeni and Lumumba's compatibility, the family dynamics were still complicated. Whether the first wife truly accepted this new development in her marriage is probably another story. Afeni said she did not join the first wife in doing the domestic duties and the child rearing. In fact, Afeni admits she wasn't domesticated at all. Her and Lumumba would walk in through the door, returning from their panther duties, expecting, sometimes demanding, for food to be put on the table. And the wife would need to make sure it's done and ready. I have a question for you guys. If you were the first wife, how would you feel in this situation? It's not even a question about whether you'd be in a polyamorous or polygamous relationship, but seeing the man you married treating you differently to his new wife, who seems to be much more equally yoked with him and better respected by him. He actually listens to her perspectives, even if he disagrees. She's a soldier like him. She's a leader like him. She's young. She's fiery. She don't take no BS from anyone. She's not submissive. She don't cook. She don't clean. All this, and she's still got that ring. She's nothing like you. And when you're alone thinking about this, you're wondering if you're even your husband's type. How are you feeling? Despite being the first wife and the mother of his children, you, as the first wife, is becoming increasingly aware of the fact that you do not experience the same type of love and respect that he is giving to a woman who hasn't even known him as long as you've known him. Afeni mentions the wife didn't have any say in the matter either. And if I remember correctly, the wife didn't say anything about how she felt about the situation or dynamic. So I imagine she had pent up anger and animosity that she was not releasing. She was not communicating what she wanted, what she needed. So this animosity was stuck to the point that she ended up sleeping with her husband's colleague, lying next to him, having pillow talks with him, exposing her husband's and his other wife's business to this man who turns out to be an FBI informant. Thank you for listening to Lit with Ren, Episode 1, Afeni, Evolution of a Revolutionary. Do you have any thoughts about Afeni's story? Have you read the book and like to share things I did not include in the episode? Please do share them with the community in the comment section. Or if you have any books you'd like to recommend for the podcast, let me know in the comment section of wherever you are listening from. Of course, I pay particular attention to books written by those from marginalized backgrounds, especially if you think a book has interesting themes, a great backstory and context, or you think it generates great discussions and you would like to know my perspective on it. Let me know in the comment section. And even if there are books considered to be classic literature but might have characters that represent those from marginalized backgrounds, I'd also like to hear your suggestions on those books as well, especially if you feel like those characters or their context and themes do not get as much attention as you feel like they should. Hopefully in future, I'd also love to have guests who are just as passionate about literature as I am and have many ideas to share. I will see you in the next episode. This is Lit with Ren.